are talking about the indie science fiction movie Prospect. This one directed and written by Christopher Caldwell and Zeke Earl. Now, you could compare this actually to a western to it in a lot of ways. It almost feels like a kind of western, but just with a kind of science fiction setting. I would actually compare this to an actual science fiction movie though called Enemy Mine, which was a kind of somewhat forgotten late 80s movie, I believe it was, where we had two kind of people from a rival faction. In Enemy Mine it was a human and an alien, and they kind of have to crash down on this planet and have to work together ultimately and become kind of friends and then kind of defeat a common foe. And it's a very kind of similar aspect to this one. So ultimately we have Sophie Thatcher plays this kind of young sort of teenage girl, and her and her father are prospectors. They're going to these kind of like different kind of moons and planets to try and search for different things. In this instance, it's these kind of like these gemstones, and they're on this kind of planet, and they ultimately run across kind of a couple of adversaries from kind of like rival prospectors, and a conflict ensues, and ultimately we are left with Pedro, Pascal's character, who was the kind of one of the adversaries, and Sophie Thatcher's character, who is this kind of teenage girl, and ultimately they're on kind of different sides of the track, so to speak, but they have to kind of try and find common ground. There's a lot of kind of uncertainty between the two of them, and ultimately it leads to a variety of kind of conflicts with kind of other characters and kind of threats as the kind of the movie progresses, and ultimately there is a kind of a showdown, and obviously what will happen, you have to watch the movie to find out. So let's talk Prospect. So definitely a different kind of style of science fiction movie that maybe some would want. This isn't a kind of an action film. This really is more of a kind of a drama akin to a kind of western along lines of kind of True Grit, that sort of thing. One of the things I really loved about this movie was the kind of the retro style technology here. Obviously, this is a kind of a scenario where interplanetary space travel is commonplace. So obviously, if it's on Earth, it's obviously a particular kind of like so many years in the future. But nonetheless, the kind of all the technology here looks very kind of retrograde, and we kind of have these kind of like 70s and early 80s kind of aesthetic of the computers and the things like that. Even the kind of the weaponry, which I thought was pretty neat looking, to be honest with you. But they do go into some real kind of in-depth way of kind of world building with kind of how things work and the suit and all this sort of thing, and the various kind of filters and stuff like that. There was actually quite a lot of techno babble in regards to how things actually work, but it really kind of set this kind of a believable aesthetic for this kind of this world to exist in. So I kind of really appreciated that. I thought the performances are very good here. So Pedro Pascal is probably the most famous actor you'll have here, and he's obviously gives this very kind of charismatic performance, which now he's kind of pretty much known for, and this is no different. And we have some quite interesting kind of like the relationship built between these kind of like these characters, and the way they kind of try to kind of overcome threats, and is this temptation going to get the better of them? That's kind of the theme here. It's just kind of like putting temptation in front of your humanity and such like that. So that's kind of a theme that kind of runs through the movie. The movie is shot fantastically. I do think the directors there do a great job of obviously capturing this kind of alien forest, so to speak, and it's kind of like beautiful, but obviously you get the sense that there could be sort of things, unknown kind of threats kind of hiding just below the surface and stuff like that, and they kind of just casually are kind of picking up these kind of gem things that are kind of in these kind of like bio kind of pustule things, so it's all pretty good. All the effects here I think are done well, and I really like the costume design as well. I thought it was fantastic, this kind of bulky headgear. Well, it doesn't work well. I mean, this might be a little bit slow for some, I would say. Like I've said, this certainly isn't any type of action movie. There's a couple of conflict scenes, but it's really not an action movie. I mean, that's a taste thing rather than a critique, but nonetheless, I feel I have to kind of say that to just to make sure you know what you're getting in for. I actually do quite like a slow burn, and this one, is a slow burn. Although I do feel it is a little bit plodding at times. There's just a little bit plodding here and there, and I feel it could have like just been trimmed up just a tad. I feel this movie lacks a little bit of characterization, particularly between Sophie Thatcher's character and her father. I felt that was kind of just a little bit on the kind of the weaker side, to be honest with you. So there's a point of the story here where there's going to be an impactful situation that happens, and to me, because we had this lack of characterization, it just didn't really have the impact that I feel it should have done. Outside of that, I feel there are some choices here made by characters, and I put this down to the script, where it doesn't make a lot of sense. So Zoe Thatcher's character suffers a loss, should we say, and the first thing she does is go and put her headphones on and listen to music. It just seemed like an odd choice to me. So there's a few kind of beats here that I didn't think were particularly kind of really kind of believable or kind of realistic in way someone would actually react to certain situations. And the only other thing I would say, this is a real nitpicky thing, but all of the characters are constantly have this kind of like this headgear on. That's obviously this sort of other kind of like environment, kind of breathing apparatus and stuff. And as such, the voices are somewhat modulated to kind of sound a little bit like they're coming through kind of microphones and stuff like that. And it's a little bit hard to understand what people say sometimes in a certain way. So it's kind of, you feel like you're going to get a little bit lost in the dialogue. Now, I appreciate the aesthetic for that, but ultimately it kind of makes it, you feel like you're losing some valuable bits of information because you can't quite make out what certain kind of words are because it's had this sort of this modulated feel. So this is a well-made film. It's a kind of a thinking man's science fiction film. The plot isn't that kind of like complex, to be honest. There's no kind of like grand sort of sweeping intricate plot here. It's more or less a kind of a fairly lean plot, but nonetheless it is definitely a kind of a science fiction, I guess, rather than sci-fi. I suppose you would put it like that. But yeah, I think it's a well-made film with great performances, a well-developed aesthetic, and kind of a fantastic kind of unique visual style. So I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.